Hello. Welcome back to Wednesday Word. Thank you so much for joining me as we prepare to conclude our study of the patriarch Abraham. If you were with me last time, you'll recall that we discussed one of the greatest tests of obedience recorded in Scripture, short of what Jesus Christ did for us, because God asked an unimaginably hard thing of him. He asked him to sacrifice Isaac, his beloved son, as a burnt offering. And we know that God never intended to allow Abraham to harm Isaac. He just wanted to make sure that Abraham's priorities were in the right order and that he would obey faithfully. And we know he did that. So today we continue from there as we move toward the end of Abraham's earthly life. We are in Genesis chapter 23, verses 1 through 9. Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. So Sarah died in Kirjath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. Then Abraham stood up from before his dead and spoke to the sons of Heth, saying, I am a foreigner and a visitor among you. Give me property for a burial place among you, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. And the sons of Heth answered Abraham, saying to him, Hear us, my lord. You are a mighty prince among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our burial places. None of us will withhold from you his burial place, that you may bury your dead. Then Abraham stood up and bowed himself to the people of the land, the sons of Heth, and he spoke with them, saying, If it is your wish that I bury my dead out of my sight, hear me, and meet with Ephron the son of Zohar for me, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which is at the end of his field. Let him give it to me at the full price, as property for a burial place among you. Okay, so we're told Sarah lived to be 127 years old. She passed away at a place called Kirjath Arba, and that actually means city of Arba, and Arba was a great chieftain who had lived in the past. Later, that city was renamed Hebron, and it was probably about 18 miles south of Jerusalem. This would place Isaac at about 37 years old. Remember, she was around 90 when he was born. We also see that Abram has lived in this area several times before. You might remember he lived near the terebinth trees of Mamre. In fact, that's where he was when Lot was taken captive. And so we see here that the old patriarch, who would now be about 137, is bereft. He has lost his beloved wife. It's obvious that he had loved her deeply. The Hebrew words that are translated here to suggest that he was mourning deeply actually tell us that he grieved loudly, that he wept openly, that it was the mourning of someone who was totally overwhelmed with grief. Nevertheless, after an amount of time passed, he stood up from his place of mourning. That's what the text said. So that leads us to believe that perhaps he had actually been on the ground, bowed over. But now he has the task of arranging a place for her burial and the process of her burial. Notice he has no intention of taking her body back to Haran or back to Ur, both former residences for them. Instead, he speaks to the sons of Heth. Now that's interesting. The sons of Heth were Hittites. They had moved south from Asia Minor years before then, and when they moved south, they actually dispossessed the former occupants, who were the sons of Arba, and that's where the name Kirjath Arba comes from partially, and that's verified in Joshua 14 and verse 15. Now, Abraham approaches these people very respectfully. He acknowledges that he's a foreigner, he's a sojourner, he's a traveler, he's a visitor amongst them. He asks if they will allow him to purchase a place to bury his beloved wife. Remember, he owns nothing. He's allowed to pitch his tents places, but he does not own that land. What we see is that this story evolves into a rather interesting chess game of Near East bargaining as Abraham works his way through this process. Now, they call him a mighty prince, the sons of Heth do, obviously in deference to his wealth and his strength and his respect and his authority. And they offer him, they say, okay, you can have the very best burying place that we have. You just pick it, you name it, and you can have it. Nobody will refuse you. But Abraham knew the game. The offer of a free burial place was not really sincere. It was more or less for show. And Abraham would not dare accept such an offer. The real issue was whether Abraham would be allowed to purchase a place which would actually give something that he owned in the land of Canaan. Remember, that's the land God gave him, but he never presumed to lord over those people who were the current residents. So Abraham asked if Ephron, the son of Zohar, could be consulted to see that whether or not he would be willing to sell the cave of Machpelah to Abraham for the full valued price. The money would be paid before witnesses. Abraham would then have a spot that he owned where he could bury Sarah. Okay, back to our text, Genesis 23, verses 10 through 20. Now Ephron dwelt among the sons of Heth. And Ephron the Hittite answered Abraham in the presence of the sons of Heth, all who entered at the gate of his city, saying, No, my lord, hear me. I give you the field and the cave that is in it. I give it to you in the presence of the sons of my people. I give it to you, bury your dead. Then Abraham bowed himself down before the people of the land. And he spoke to Ephron in the hearing of the people of the land, saying, If you will give it, please hear me. I will give you money for the field. Take it from me, and I will bury my dead there. And Ephron answered Abraham, saying to him, My lord, listen to me. The land is worth 400 shekels of silver. What is that between you and me? So bury your dead. And Abraham listened to Ephron, and Abraham weighed out the silver for Ephron, which he had named in the hearing of the sons of Heth, 400 shekels of silver, currency of the merchants. So the field of Ephron, which was in Machpelah, which was before Mamre, the field and the cave which was in it, and all the trees that were in the field, which were within all the surrounding borders, were deeded to Abraham as a possession in the presence of the sons of Heth before all who went in at the gate of his city. And after this, Abraham buried Sarah his wife in the cave of the field of Machpelah before Mamre, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So the field and the cave that is in it were deeded to Abraham by the sons of Heth as property for a burial place. Now, Abraham is treading a fine line in these negotiations. He's a foreigner. He's right in the middle of the Hittites, who, by the way, were descendants of the son of Canaan, who was named Heth. And Canaan was a son of Ham, and Ham was a son of Noah. You might remember that. Even though Abraham interacted with them, we know that the Hittites were actually one of the 7 nations or people groups that God had told the Israelites ultimately to dispossess when they went into the land of Canaan, having come from Egyptian bondage. So, okay, Abraham's among foreigners. He doesn't own anything. He's powerful. He's rich. He's respected for that. but he doesn't own anything, and he's a foreigner among them. We see that he's at the gate of the city. That's where business was conducted. We know that. That was typical. He's intent on bargaining for a desired burial place for Sarah, but he knows that he must pay attention to the cultural cues. He certainly did not approach these people in arrogance. We have seen that he bows before them. So when Ephron offers the cave and the surrounding land to Abraham, which, by the way, most people are totally sure that was a double cave, that it had two parts, two entrances. And so when it's offered free of charge, he knows he cannot accept that extravagant gift. Notice that Ephron made the offer in front of a lot of witnesses. Abraham did not need negative fallout that could result from misjudging this situation. So certainly he didn't take that offer. He insisted he would pay the full value of the land. And all the while he's showing this great respect, he's pushing to find out what that value is. Ephron finally tells him that the land's worth 400 shekels of silver, which he says, that's nothing between me and you. Well, actually, that is not true. Even though it's difficult to determine the exact value of silver at that point in time, because even today, the value of silver fluctuates based on the market, on the demand. But some have estimated that in that day, because silver was really not found in that area, so it would be valued. The value even in that day was probably roughly equivalent to $5,000. That would have been a huge amount of money in Abraham's day. Abraham weighed out the silver in front of witnesses, paid the full designated amount, and in doing so, he purchased a field, the trees on the field, and the cave, probably a double cave, that was found there. Now, the property was signed over much the way we would pass a title or a deed. I don't know how that worked in that day, but it became the only part of Canaan that Abraham would ever own, even though God had promised the land to him. And that's certainly clear in Hebrews 11, verses 8 through 10. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out of the place which he would receive as an inheritance, and he went out not knowing where he was going. By faith, he dwelt in the land of promise as in a foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Abraham absolutely modeled the ability to look beyond what's going on in this current life to the life that is promised and the reward that is promised to us ultimately. Hebrews 11:13, these all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. We know that's at the end of Hebrews 11, where all those incredible men and women died without ever seeing promised Messiah come, that promise of eternal life with Jesus Christ and with God. In fact, there is no better picture of that than Abraham. He knew that at the end of his journey, there would be a better country. So, like Abraham, as believers, we must look for a heavenly country where God has prepared a city that's beyond our imagination for us. Hebrews 11, verse 16, but now they desire a better. That is a heavenly country. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them and for us. Praise the Lord. So, Abraham purchased this field and the cave of Machpelah near Hebron, and that is a foreshadowing of the fact that his descendants will eventually own not just a little piece, but that land that God had promised to them. He could now bury Sarah. We know that later Abraham would also be buried there. So would Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, and Leah. and it came to the point that it was known as the Cave of the Patriarchs. We do strongly believe that Abraham was buried there. It has been a site of religious significance for Jews, Muslims, and Christians. We've talked about his patriarch role for all of those. It actually became a Muslim possession after the Muslim conquest of the Levant, or Syria, somewhere between 634 and 638 AD. It was originally a Byzantine basilica, but it was converted into an Abrahamic mosque following the Muslim conquest. It's still a site of contention today, more in Hebron than actually at the site of the cave. But Muslims and Jews have a designated place to pray at this tomb of Abraham, which became Tomb of the Patriarchs. Wow. A special place, but not where we worship, because we worship the Savior who came from that lineage. Okay, back to our text. This is Genesis 24, verses 1 through 9. Now, Abraham was old, well advanced in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in all things. So Abraham said to the oldest servant of his house, who ruled over all he had, "Please, put your hand under my thigh, and I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, among whom I dwell. But you shall go to my country and to my family and take a wife for my son Isaac." And the servant said to him, "Perhaps the woman will not be willing to follow me to this land. Must I take your son back to the land from which you came?" But Abraham said to him, "Beware that you do not take my son back there. The Lord God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my family, and who spoke to me and swore to me, saying, 'To your descendants I give this land,' he will send his angel before you, and you shall take a wife for my son from there. And if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be released from this oath. Only do not take my son back there." So the servant put his hand under the thigh of Abraham, his master, and swore to him concerning this matter. Abraham's well advanced in years now. He needs to make sure that his heir, the one God promised him, Isaac, has a wife that is taken from Abraham's own people, not from the Canaanites. He is adamant. To make sure that happened, Abraham turned to his trusted servant. Now, this passage does not call that servant by name, but most certainly that's Eliezer, who before Isaac was born would have been heir to everything that Abraham had. We saw that clearly in Genesis 15. So when he refers to him as his oldest servant, it's not really a reference to his age. It's his senior servant. It's his servant with the most authority that oversees everything that Abraham has. So before Eliezer leaves on this journey, Abraham gives him very strict and clear directions and asks a sacred vow for his assurance. He says, "Look, you are not going to let Isaac be married to a Canaanite. And if there's a problem with the girl, you're not going to take Isaac back to my homeland to marry there. Make sure that you understand these things are important and that you promise me." He's actually asking Eliezer to make an oath that would have the weightiness of an oath made on someone's deathbed. He says, "Put your hand under my thigh." Now, that's not a strange or suggestive action. It's just a symbolic thing that would have been done in cultures in that day. Now, please hear me. To pagans, that gesture and that kind of oath meant that if you violated that oath, that unborn children yet in the future would avenge the disloyalty and the dishonesty of not keeping that oath. That kind of oath bound the servant more effectively to make sure that an acceptable completion of that promise was done. So that means that Eleazar has made a strong promise that he will fulfill Abraham's wishes concerning Isaac and a wife for Isaac. He's going back home to Abraham's people. He's going to find a wife there. That technically means he's going back to what we know as Syria. And that's important because it was God's way of maintaining the purity of the bloodline that would eventually produce Jesus Christ. Okay, back to our text. Genesis 24, 10 through 14. Then the servant took 10 of his master's camels and departed, for all his master's goods were in his hand. And he arose and went to Mesopotamia, to the city of Nahor. And he made his camels kneel down outside the city by a well of water at evening time, the time when women go out to draw water. Then he said, O Lord God of my master Abraham, please give me success this day and show kindness to my master Abraham. Behold, here I stand by the well of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Now let it be that the young woman to whom I say, please let down your pitcher that I might drink, and she says, drink, and I will also give your camels drink. Let her be the one you have appointed for your servant Isaac, and by this I will know that you have shown kindness to my master. Okay, the servant takes 10 camels. Now, most assuredly, those are not empty camels. They have numerous riders and extensive goods. I can't say that there's a rider on every camel because I know he packed a lot of gifts, but certainly this man would not have traveled alone at all. Now, it's interesting because many archaeologists claim that camels were not domesticated at this point in history. In fact, that it was several centuries later, even though camels are mentioned often in the early books in the Old Testament. And I'll tell you, camel bones have been dug from houses near Haran. A record of camel feed purchases has been found in southern Turkey, dating way back to the patriarchal age. So I kind of think the archaeologists are probably wrong. Now, Eleazar went to Mesopotamia. That's a Greek word meaning the land between the waters, with reference to the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. It actually in Hebrew means Aram of the two rivers, which is certainly the area of the city of Nahor, because it was near Haran. And so indeed, Eleazar has gone back to Abraham's home of origin. Now, Eleazar knows that the God of Abraham is a God of miracles. He's a God of divine favor. After all, he's seen God's blessings on Abraham for years and years and years. So Eleazar prays, asking for a very specific sign from God. And God obviously is going to clearly answer that prayer. I will say that I'm not sure that prayers that specific would always work for us, but we know that God can and does answer that specifically, and he does provide directions in a number of ways. So he's waiting for a young woman to come out, a young woman who will be veiled, because until they were married, they kept themselves veiled. He will recognize her as a single woman. He will ask her specific questions. She will meet every jot and tittle of those requirements, and then he'll know. Now, you do understand that when he says, okay, she'll give me a drink and she'll offer to water my camels, that was quite a statement, because a camel who is really thirsty can consume somewhere between 30 and 53 gallons of water at one time and can slurp it down in about 3 minutes. That blows my mind. So any young woman who would offer such a service would certainly be showing humility, helpfulness, industriousness, and a willingness to serve others with kindness. Okay, there is a reference to Bethuel. We know that Bethuel is the father of Laban and Rebekah. Nahor and Milcah were the parents of Bethuel, and Abraham is Bethuel's uncle. All right, back to our text, chapter 24, verses 15 through 28. And it happened, before he had finished speaking, that behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, came out with her pitcher on her shoulder. Now the young woman was very beautiful to behold, a virgin. No man had known her. And she went down to the well, filled her pitcher, and came up. And the servant ran to meet her and said, "Please, let me drink a little water from your pitcher." So she said, "Drink, my lord." Then she quickly let her pitcher down in her hand and gave him a drink. And when she had finished giving him a drink, she said, "I will draw water for your camels also, until they have finished drinking." Note that. Then she quickly emptied her pitcher into the trough, ran back to the well to draw water, and drew for all his camels. Obviously, the watering trough is not even right beside the well. And the man, wondering at her, remained silent so as to know whether the Lord had made his journey prosperous or not. So it was, when the camels had finished drinking, that the man took a golden nose ring weighing half a shekel and 2 bracelets for her wrist weighing 10 shekels of gold. And he said, "Whose daughter are you? Tell me, please, is there room in your father's house for us to lodge?" So she said to him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, Milcah's son, whom she bore to Nahor." Moreover, she said to him, "We have both straw and feed enough and room to lodge." Notice she said she was the daughter of her mother. Had she been a son, it certainly would have said he was the son of his father. Moreover, she said straw and feed enough, room to lodge. She says, "Okay, look, we've got, I'm of this lineage, and we have sustenance for your animals, a place for lodging for you and your entourage." Then the man bowed down his head and worshiped God. And he said, "Blessed be the Lord God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his mercy and his truth toward my master. As for me, being on the way, the Lord led me to the house of my master's brethren." So the young woman ran and told her mother's household these things. Okay, Rebekah shows up. She's at the well. Eleazar didn't even finish offering his prayer. And she believes that the answer to his prayer has already come and that God literally guided him to her. Now, we know that God provides direction. Maybe not always the way he did for Eleazar, but certainly we can expect God to guide him when we're doing our best to serve him and we are seeking him for direction. I remind you that Psalm 37:23 says, "The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delights in his way." Proverbs 3:6, "In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths." So here's Rebekah, beautiful, intelligent, kind, hardworking, a young virgin. And did you notice in this passage that as she's talking about her family, that Abraham is referred to as the brother of Nahor? Now, you know that genealogies are different. Sometimes generations are skipped. Sometimes familial references are not exactly like what we would say. Nahor is technically not the brother of Abraham. He's the nephew of Abraham, the son of Abraham's brother. which would make Rebekah Abraham's great niece. Okay, so Rebekah comes to the well. Eleazar has been there praying. She draws water. He asks for a drink. She complies. When he finished drinking, she offers to water all of those camels, totally meeting the criteria that Eleazar had set forth and had listed in his prayer. After she watered the camels, Eleazar gave her a gold nose ring, and in that day and age that would have been as much a part of normal adornment as earrings are today. He also gave her 2 gold bracelets, but these were just preliminary gifts, even though they were costly and showy. He asked again about the making sure of the bloodline. So he wants to know, whose daughter are you? And do you have room for me and for my entourage? Can you accommodate us? When she makes it clear that she's from the family of Abraham and that there is adequate provision for the whole entourage to stay in their home, Eleazar bows and worships God again. He knows that God has been faithful in his heart. He doesn't see all the details worked out, but he believes that they definitely will be, and that God has been yet again faithful to his master Abraham. He basically said, the Lord led me straight to the house of Rebekah's family. She's the one, in other words. Now, at that point, Rebekah runs to alert her mother's household. Now, we would expect her to say father's household, but she doesn't, regarding everything that's been happening. And you know that it's her mother's dwelling area, probably a tent, could have been a more stable and permanent structure. And remember also that it's not unusual for husbands and wives to not exactly live all the time in the same tent. We see that a number of other places. Okay, back to our text. Now Rebekah, this is beginning verse 29, chapter 24. Now Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban. And Laban ran out to the man by the well. So it came to pass, when he saw the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's wrists, and when he heard the words of his sister Rebekah saying, thus the man spoke to me, that he went to the man. And there he stood by the camels at the well. And he said, come in, O blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside? For I have prepared the house and a place for the camels. Then the man came to the house, and he unloaded the camels, and provided straw and feed for the camels, and water to wash his feet, and the feet of the men who were with him. Food was set before him to eat, but he said, I will not eat until I have told about my errand. And he said, speak on. So he said, I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has blessed my master greatly, and he has become great, and he has given him flocks and herds, silver and gold, male and female servants, and camels and donkeys. And Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master when she was old, and to him he has given all that he has. Now my master made me swear, saying, you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, in whose land I dwell. But you shall go to my father's house and to my family, and take a wife for my son. And I said to my master, perhaps the woman will not follow me. But he said to me, the Lord before whom I walk will send his angels with you and prosper your way, and you shall take a wife for my son from my family and from my father's house. You will be clear from this oath when you arrive among my family, for if they will not give her to you, then you will be released from my oath. So beginning in verse 29, we start to see some early indicators of the character of Laban. Now notice his reaction when he saw. That expression is actually in the text. When he saw the expensive nose ring, the heavy, expensive bracelets that Eleazar had given to Rebekah. She also told him all that the man had said to her. Laban suddenly becomes a host extraordinaire. I mean, he's extremely zealous. And we know that was custom, and we know hospitality was custom, but it seems a little bit like he's over the top here. It seems that there's a little more going on than hospitality customs. It seems like he couldn't fail to be hospitable to a man who could afford such extravagant gifts. So Laban goes out to Abraham's servant, and the servant is still standing there by the camels where they've been watered. Notice what Laban says to him. "Come in, O blessed of the Lord. Why do you stand outside?" He is eager and eager. He provides a place for the camels. He makes sure that everything is in place. He also gives them water to wash their feet, not only for Eleazar, but also for the men who are with him. Food is set before this faithful servant of Abraham, but he will not even eat until he has explained the reason why he has come to Mesopotamia on a journey that was initiated and instructed by Abraham himself. After being encouraged to speak, he goes on to provide significant detail to explain who he was, what Abraham had charged him to do, Abraham's wealth and divine favor, the admonition that he absolutely not take a wife for Isaac among the Canaanites, that he not take Isaac back to the land of Canaan, I'm sure is going to work its way in there somewhere, and that he would be released from the oath if and only if the family of the girl was unwilling for her to accompany Eleazar back to where Abraham and Isaac were. Notice particularly verse 40. "But he said to me, the Lord before whom I walk will send his angel with you and prosper your way, and you shall take a wife for my son from my family and from my father's house." Wow. Notice Abraham's understanding of God's messengers who go before and prepare the way and sometimes deliver messages to us. We see that God indeed not only can and does God, but he prepares a way. He makes a way for us even if it seems like there's no way. And one way he can do that is send angels before his children to do what they are unable to do, not only to protect them, but to prepare a way for their success. We know that angels are ministering spirits sent out for the sake of those who are to inherit salvation, those who belong to God, those who are serving God and fulfilling God's plan. Hebrews 1:13-14 says, "But to which of the angels has he ever said, 'Sit at my right hand till I make your enemies your footstool'? Are they not all ministering spirits sent forth to minister for those who will inherit salvation?" What about Matthew 18:10? Take heed that you do not despise one of these little ones. For I say to you that in heaven their angels always see the face of my Father who is in heaven. Okay. Wow. So the involvement of angels in the affairs of man, that's not a strange thing, but it sometimes surprises us how much the Old Testament men of God knew without the benefit of Scripture like we have. They knew it from encounter and experience. Now, in the next section, Genesis 24, verses 42-51, we're going to see that basically Eleazar is going to repeat the account of everything that Abraham had told him, and this time in the presence of Rebekah's family, including Bethuel, her father. The most important part of this section for us that is not repetitious begins in about verse 50 of Genesis 24. And it says, Then Laban and Bethuel answered and said, The thing comes from the Lord. You've retold us the whole story, Eleazar. And how are we going to argue with this? We cannot speak to you either bad or good. Here is Rebekah before you. Take her and go, and let her be your master's son's wife, as the Lord has spoken. Wow. Eleazar now affirms he believes Rebekah's the answer to his prayer. Rebekah's been selected to be the wife of Isaac. I skipped a lot of the repetition, but he's retold the whole story. And now he believes that based on this result of his prayer, his interaction with Rebekah, her actions that met every jot and tittle of what he had set in place as requirements, he believes that this is the girl. Now, okay, the family says they can't argue with that. Notice they don't even consult Rebekah. They just say, here, take her. She is intended to be the wife of Isaac. Okay, let's see how that plays out. Beginning now in verse 52 of chapter 24 and reading through verse 60. And it says, And it came to pass, when Abraham's servant heard their words, that he worshipped the Lord, bowing himself to the earth. Then the servant brought out jewelry of silver, jewelry of gold, and clothing, and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave precious things to her brother and to her mother. There it is. And he and the men who were with him ate and drank and stayed all night. Then they arose in the morning, and he said, Send me away to my master. But her brother and her mother said, Let the young woman stay with us a few days, at least 10. After that she may go. And he said to them, Do not hinder me, since the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away so that I may go to my master. So they said, We will call the young woman and ask her personally. Then they called Rebekah and said to her, Will you go with this man? And she said, I will go. So they sent Rebekah, their sister, away, and her nurse with her, and Abraham's servant and his men. And they blessed Rebekah and said to her, Our sister, may you become the mother of thousands of 10,000s, and may your descendants possess the gates of those who hate them. Eleazar, again, falls on his face to worship the Lord when he hears the news that, okay, Rebekah is going to go to be Isaac's wife. He bows himself to the ground in honor to the God who had been faithful and led him in his search. Then he brings out this vast array of costly presents: silver jewelry, gold jewelry, fine clothing, very costly gifts. Now, there is no doubt these are wedding gifts. This is a dowry for Rebekah. And did you notice that special gifts were also presented to Laban and to Rebekah's mother? That's interesting. It's almost as if Laban knew that he was going to benefit from this transaction. Now, it may not be in a way that we could conclude that gifts are being given to compensate for the fact that Rebekah's going to be taken far away. I mean, it was common social, cultural practice for bride gifts to be given. And the custom of presenting these valuable gifts to the family of the bride may go back as far as 1720s BC, back to the time of Hammurabi. I don't know. probably. Some people actually think that it's possible that this business of giving gifts to the family of the bride was a residual, lingering effect of the time in which brides were actually bought. They were purchased. I don't know, but it was a cultural practice of the day, and these gifts were not just paltry gifts. They were very expensive, very elaborate gifts given both to Rebekah and to her family members. Now, Eliezer and his men ate and drank, spent the night. But when morning came, he was ready to get on the road. No doubt he was excited about the idea of sharing with Abraham the fact that his journey has been successful. He has found the wife that Isaac should have. He feels like it was stamped and affirmed by God. This was it, and he was ready to get on the road. It would be a significant journey, and he wanted to get there and tell Abraham the good news. Okay. Eliezer was excited about leaving, but Rebekah's family was not excited about her leaving so quickly. In fact, there was a bit of a protest from her mother and her brother Laban. They wanted Rebekah to stay and visit a while with them before she left. They didn't share Eliezer's excitement about the departure time. Now, okay, it probably helps us to understand that an Eastern goodbye wasn't just walking someone to the car and waving as they pull out of the driveway. It was quite an extensive process. You might note that Laban and her mother asked for at least 10 days, but I'll be honest, it could have been 2 days or 2 months or even longer. I mean, because it was a process of stay and let's enjoy your company and our company, and we can leave early in the morning. Okay. So there's a bit of a difference of opinion as to when this leaving should happen. It was decided that Rebekah would be allowed to make this decision herself as to whether or not she was willing to leave immediately with the man and go to become Isaac's bride. It's almost surprising, but she agreed to go and agreed to go immediately. So she is going to be sent on her way with blessings from her family and also with her nurse, which may very well have been kind of like a nanny, kind of like the woman who would take care of her personally. And it was a common practice to give a young woman her nurse when she got married. We see that later with Rachel and with Leah. So it wasn't uncommon at all. So there is a departure time, and her family wishes her well, having no idea that the blessing they speak over her will ultimately come to pass, but will not come to pass easily. It will come with some delay and with some struggle. In parting, the word says her family blessed her. Our sister, may you become the mother of thousands of 10,000s, and may your descendants possess the gates of those who hate them. So we see it's a blessing that she be very fruitful, that she have children, and that her children have children until there is a host of descendants through her for Abraham's son Isaac. Okay, so Rebekah's on her way. The servant is eager to get back to Abraham, and we're going to find that that is about to happen in Genesis 24, verses 61 through 67. Then Rebekah and her maids arose, and they rode on the camels and followed the man. So the servant took Rebekah and departed. Now, we don't know whether some of the men had to walk the return trip or whether there were a couple of camels left I suspect that the gifts that were given to Rebecca's family might have been on those camels, and now they're freed up for Rebecca and her nurse to ride. Now Isaac came from the way of Beer Lahairoi, for he dwelt in the south. And Isaac went out to meditate in the field in the evening. And he lifted his eyes and looked, and there the camels were coming. Then Rebekah lifted her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from her camel, for she had said to the servant, "Who is this man walking in the field to meet us?" The servant said, "It is my master." So she took a veil and covered herself. And the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife. And he loved her. So Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. Okay, the journey is nearing completion. The servant is about to get what he wants. He's going to be able to tell Abraham his good news. And as they are approaching, they see that Isaac has gone out into a field. Now, the Hebrew language is interesting and tells us more than the English translations, because the wording that's used suggests that he perhaps went out to walk, to meditate, even to pray. Now, he's near Beer Lahairoi, and that is a name that we've heard before. It was a well where Hagar found hope in the southern part of the country. They are at this point down south, and they're probably 12 miles south of Kadesh. So Isaac is out there walking in the field. Now, we have to go ahead and be honest. Isaac is not, at this point, and never will become, as colorful in his person and in his actions as Abraham. He's not quite as flamboyant. He's not quite as outgoing. Not quite as many adventures happen to him. He's rather quiet and somewhat thoughtful. He's about 40 years old at this time and has never married. Now, some scholars actually refer to him as a quiet interlude between Abraham and Jacob. Certainly, if you were ranking the characters in the book of Genesis, he would not be on top. He's important. He's the lineage through which Jesus would ultimately come, but we just don't have as many stories about him that show that character, that personality that Abraham and Jacob had. Okay, that being said, some scholars also argue that Isaac is out here walking because he is deeply mourning because Sarah died while Eliezer was gone. Now, I don't know about that. The timeline doesn't exactly line up with that. I mean, I get the logic of what they're saying, that it would explain what he was doing out there, but it could be that he's just out there contemplating the fact that Eliezer has gone to bring him a bride, wondering about what she will be like and what their life will be like. I don't know. Scholars certainly disagree about that, but I'm not sure totally that the timeline lines up. In any case, Isaac is out there alone. He's in a contemplative mood. He looks up and sees camels approaching. Now, Rebekah also looks up and sees a man approaching. And so her question is, who is that man? Now, she's going to comply with custom down the line. She adjusts her veil because she's an unmarried woman. She's supposed to wear that veil until she's a married woman. And so she does that. English doesn't do justice to her next action. She apparently jumps off that camel and moves toward him in deference to his importance, in deference to the role he's about to play in her life. Eleazar explains everything that has occurred to Isaac, gives him a very detailed account. And it's interesting because apparently Isaac very quickly grew to love Rebekah, and she filled a void in his life that was left when his mother passed away, and became most definitely a soulmate and a blessing to him in that respect. Okay, back to our text, and this time the information is quite different and things most definitely change. Now, Isaac is married. He's at least 40 years old when he marries, which makes Abraham at least 140 when Isaac marries. So we know that we're talking about an older man. Because of that, it brings about some timing considerations for the next passage. Abraham again took a wife, verse 1, chapter 25, and her name was Keturah. And she bore him Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Jokshan begot Sheba and Dedan, and the sons of Dedan were Ashurim, Letushim, Leamim, and the sons of Midian were Ephath, Epher, Hanok, Abida, and Eldaah. All these were children of Keturah. And Abraham gave all that he had to Isaac. But Abraham gave gifts to the sons of the concubines. That word is plural. Which Abraham had, and while he was still living, he sent them eastward away from Isaac his son to the country of the east. This is the sum of the years of Abraham's life, which he lived, 175. Okay, 175 years. Then Abraham breathed his last and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people. And his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar the Hittite, the field which Abraham purchased from the sons of Heth. There Abraham was buried, and Sarah his wife. And it came to pass, after the death of Abraham, that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac dwelt in Beer-lahai-roi. Now, some scholars absolutely argue that Abraham took Keturah as a secondary wife, or better term is concubine, as was the custom of the day, whether it was God's plan for his believers or not. It was customary in that day, and that he did that earlier before Sarah actually died. Now, I know that all the Bible's not in chronological order, and they're counting the fact that Keturah actually bore 6 sons for Abraham, and they're saying, well, he was 140 years old when Isaac got married, and he lived 175. That's 35 years. Did he actually get married and have 6 sons in that amount of time? I'm not sure that's an important point, and it is theoretically possible that he did that. I will tell you that the main point here is to make it clear that Sarah was always his primary wife. 1 Chronicles 1:32 makes that clear. Now, the sons born to Keturah, Abraham's concubine, were Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. The sons of Jokshan were Sheba and Dedan. So her status was always totally clear. She shared the same status that Hagar had, even though she produced 6 sons for Abraham. The name of some of those sons is that is still found in numerous South Arabian inscriptions, and also those names appear often in the early books for the Old Testament recordings, especially listing places and things of historical significance. Midian is a prime example, and the Midianites, so that'll be familiar to you. Now, all of these sons of Keturah are sent away. They're given gifts. because Abraham's real wealth all went to Isaac. It's interesting to me that Isaac and Ishmael actually came together well enough to bury their father. None of the sons of Keturah were apparently a part of that process, but these two men who did not walk the same path and probably did not get along that well, at least came together for that purpose. And he was buried in the cave of Machpelah, the same place that Sarah was buried as he would have wished. And that ended the life of the great patriarch of faith. What an incredible story it has been. I hope you've enjoyed the journey and that you'll be with me next time as we start a brand new study. God bless.